So in 2008, working with the Beaver Lake Cree, we filed a lawsuit that says, that names 17,000 individual authorizations, which includes all of the world's major oil companies in those who are benefiting from those authorizations. And we filed that lawsuit, and it says the Beaver Lake Cree have a right to hunt and fish, and we name them. We're here to talk about diversity, and we talk about diversity and abundance, right? So you have this diversity of animals, all of the animals that they traditionally hunted and fished, from skunk to marten to grayling to little pelicans, little fat pelican babies, which were a popular food apparently. So they're granted this right forever. And the lawsuit names all of them, and so it's a big lawsuit. It's a long-term lawsuit. is really ground down at this point in procedural aspects, and it's a slow-moving monstrosity. And but we're working away on it. And so what's happened in Canadian law over the last few years is this. I mean, it used to be that when you said we have a treaty right to hunt and fish, the answer from governments was, "That's fine. Fill your boots. Go hunt and fish," and it didn't matter, whether there was anywhere to hunt and fish. The reality is the law has come a long way over the last decade, and what the law is on those rights now is this. A right to hunt and fish is a right to the protection of the natural habitat that is necessary to allow that hunting and fishing to happen. So you have to have enough natural, untouched boreal forest for those animals to exist. Not only that, there has to be enough of that untouched habitat for there to be a surplus of animals, such that there are enough to be taken to support those treaty rights. So that's a big thing. We talked about George Poitras. It was a Mikisew Cree case, really, that had a huge impact there. It said that right, it has to be a meaningful right. And so you have to think about the traditional use and practices of the people that live there in order to give that right meaning. And then another case we worked on, which was the Chilcotin case. And it really said, it's just imagine this. And before a forest company can come in and cut down some trees, they have to figure out how many marten, fisher, squirrels, how many are there, and how many are going to be necessary and for there to be a harvestable surplus. That's an impossible burden for governments and companies to really meet, right? I mean, go out and count the marten, go out and count the moose and the deer. So that's the essence of that lawsuit. There is a right here. The right is to hunt and fish forever, and that right is being destroyed. The law on this is very strong. The law is not in doubt. The difficulty, of course, is financing a case of this size and putting together the evidence, right? It requires expert reports. You have to go to court. You have to prove that those rights are being destroyed. So along the way to this, what we've started recently and just was filed a week and a half ago is another lawsuit, and that lawsuit is about caribou. We have this wonderful glossy from that the Cooperative Bank put together. So this Cooperative Bank in England funded a study by Stan Booten. Some of you will know the name. He's one if not the leading authority on woodland caribou in Canada. And I'm sure lots of you watched this play out over the last little while, right? Canada went out, they hired all of the Canada's best woodland caribou experts. They put together a report, and the federal government sat on that report for a year. When they finally released it, they attached a forward to it that was unattributed that said, well, this is very nice, but we clearly need more research. Meanwhile, those scientists were saying, no, we've done the research. Here's the research. 70% of these herds, I think it is, are going to be extirpated in the next 10 years if there is not immediate action. So woodland caribou are on the endangered list under the Canadian Species at Risk Act. The minister was required under the legislation to have a plan in place by 2007 for their recovery. There is no such plan in place. So a week and a half ago, we filed a court application in the federal court asking a judge to say, no, the minister has to put a plan in place. They have to do it on an emergency basis, and on an emergency basis, they need to protect those critical caribou habitats. Now, those critical caribou habitats in northeastern Alberta happen to line up almost perfectly with all of the oil and gas developments that are planned for the next 10 to 15 years. So it's, again, another one of those wonderful illusions that or not, that critical caribou habitat actually covers those areas. So that's actually going to be a much faster case. We expect to be in court in the next couple months and have a decision down early next year. And it should have our hope is that it will have an injunctive effect, right? There will have to be an immediate holdback of all authorizations and a rescinding of authorizations that have been done so far for critical caribou habitat. I will tell you this, I've sort of driven 6 hours up an ice road outside of Fort McMurray, and I've been in one of those oil and gas camps and looked at a map on a wall that is a map of critical caribou habitat, and it's like every inch of that critical caribou habitat is full of pipelines, roads, SAGD developments, and all of those other things. So, it's a late in the day fight, but we're very confident about this particular case, and we're very hopeful that we can move it on through in very short order. If there's a risk to this case, it's that it is a Species at Risk Act case. The federal government, on losing that case, could turn around and change the legislation the next day. We think that would be very hard for them politically to do, but it's not something we'd see as being outside of the range of activity for the federal government. However, the Beaver Lake Cree, small community with all of those social problems that small communities in northern Alberta has stood up, and they actually, although the bank's been helpful, the largest contributor to this fight have been the Beaver Lake Cree themselves, and they've stood up and they're standing firm, and they're being very courageous in the heart of the tar sands industry to take this stand. And that overall, that larger lawsuit, it's a constitutional rights lawsuit. Again, the law is very strong, and we expect to be successful over the long term with it. But again, it's a matter of getting there, and it's a long process, and it's frustrating in the face of the massive amounts of money that the tar sands are generating. So that's it. Thank you for coming out today.